Hi creative friends, welcome back to Kelly Does Stuff. And today's video I'm going to share with you the full reveal of my St. Paddy's Day display. I've talked about this display in a couple of other videos and the day is finally here. And I know what you're all thinking, Kelly, the timing could not be more perfect. It's mid-April and the only thing anybody is thinking about is St. Paddy's Day. Yeah, that's the type of quality, timely, crafted videos you can expect from this channel. I did finish the display in time for St. Paddy's Day. I had every intention of sharing it with you all, but life happened and it took a while to put it together, but it's ready now. And I am super excited to share this with you. I've never done a display quite like this before, and it's time. There's nothing else to say. Let's do St. Paddy's Day! Yay!
Okay, so you guys know how I feel about planning, but sometimes for projects like this that are a little bit more involved and gonna have a lot of parts to it, I do like to sketch something out. And clearly you can see that my sketching skills are pretty incredible. I'm basically an architect right now. Like, I just kind of do that on the side. My idea for this project, you can see here, is I'm gonna do some archy things. I wrote some numbers that correspond to inches. We're gonna have 2 levels. That's my idea for the project. And then we're gonna have a river that runs on the bottom part. And there's also going to be a bridge. And can you see it? Can you see the vision? Okay, let's go. To start off, I'm going to make those arches I talked about using XPS foam. And look at me, I am measuring. This is going to go perfectly. I'm measuring the distance between my arches and then the width at the base of the arches themselves. Then I'm just gonna freeform the shape of the arch, and you're gonna see that once I carve it using a hot wire tool, it's not gonna look great. They're all going to look different, and honestly, with each arch that I carved, it sort of felt like they got a little bit worse. Probably because my hot wire tool was getting hotter and hotter because it was plugged in for longer, and I don't have a lot of control and experience carving like this with this tool. And the reason that I am mentioning this is because I want to encourage you to just try stuff, to just practice. Sometimes we see people do these like really incredible displays and we're like, I could never do that. And listen, yes, some people the first time they try anything, they're just amazing. A lot of us though, we just have to practice and we have to keep trying. Here I am using the hot wire engraver tool by Hot Wire Foam Factory to create my brickwork in the XPS foam. Now typically I use a pencil for this because XPS foam is great with just a pencil, but I wanted to practice using this tool for this purpose. And I definitely got a lot of practice because I made a lot of brick on this project. I'm using parchment paper to trace the shape of those wonky looking arches, and then I'm going to take that tracing and place it onto another piece of XPS foam, pressing into that foam so that I'll have enough of an outline to use a blade to cut out the arches. Because you know how arches will have brick that go around the arch that are a different direction? I wanted to do that, but I wanted the brick to have more of a pop, a dimensional effect coming off of the arch. Does that make sense? Make sure you're working with a really sharp blade. It will give you a cleaner cut and make it much easier. It is also safer. My blade was definitely not sharp enough. I use hot glue to attach these pieces, and then I make sure that I continue that brick pattern into the arch. And then it's time to paint. Moving on to our cobblestone road. I have done a ton of cobblestone, but it was St. Paddy's Day. We had to do something a little bit different. I purchased these cookie cutter shamrock shapes off of Amazon, and I'm pressing them into the styrofoam to give me the outline of the shape. Then I drew my normal cobblestone around the shamrock. Then it was time to go in with that hot wire engraver tool. This is typically my process for cobblestone. It's double. I draw it and then I carve it because I always felt like I didn't have quite the confidence with that engraver if I didn't have a guide. But I did so much cobblestone for this project, I got so much practice in, that eventually I got to skip the drawing step and go straight to carving. Ah, the magic of practice. Finally, 147 years later, it was time to paint our cobblestone. Is it even St. Paddy's Day if we don't have an Irish pub? The answer is absolutely not. I did a separate video on how I turned this building that I got at Goodwill for $4.99 into an Irish pub. It basically required some paint, and I'm totally in love with the way it came out. One thing I didn't cover in my pub video was what to do about these Christmas trees, and I really wanted to incorporate these barrels into the display, and they covered the trees perfectly, and it felt right. Like there should be beer in these barrels, but the proportions really bothered me, and so for some reason it just felt less disproportionate if we made those barrels planters. I really loved this idea. They were so cute. And it gave us a pop of color to break up so much of the green that is in this display. Did I mention it's St. Paddy's Day with a spooky twist? Bring in those skeletons. I purchased several Limax accessories and painted them to fit the theme. Now you may have noticed that I was painting a marching band because obviously we have to have a St. Paddy's Day parade, and what is a parade without a float? I am using this little mini pallet that I got at the Dollar Tree as well as this car, and what I want from this car is to just take the wheels off so I can attach them to my pallet. The first set of wheels came off the front of this car so easily. The back set, well, this little toy made me work for it, but I eventually got them off. Next, I'm covering the pallet in some felt. To give my float a little fun skirt, I'm going to use this garland that I got at the dollar store. You'll see I'm pulling off those little leprechauns there that I didn't need, just attaching this all the way around with some hot glue. Now to create what was going to go on the float, I decided I wanted a rainbow going into a pot of gold. I'm creating the rainbow out of pipe cleaners. And I was so excited when I found a package of these pots at the Dollar Tree, but the proportions were way off. So I decided to make my first ever pot out of air dry clay. Okay, that's much better. I waited about 24 hours for this to dry, and then I painted it black and then the inside gold. Speaking of gold, I'm going to fill my pot with two different types of gold glitter that I got at the dollar store. I'm going to start off first with the smaller pieces of the glitter, and if you look closely at the pot, you will see there is a hole in the center of it there. Before the clay dried, I pressed the end of my rainbow into the clay to give it that hole, so that way it would have a nice, easy place to set once it was time to assemble. Then I went in with those bigger pieces of gold to top off my pot. And I anchored the other side of the rainbow into a piece of XPS foam. Of course we had to have something else on the float, and I really wanted to incorporate a creepy leprechaun somewhere into this display, and the float felt like a great place for it. But can I just tell you how hard it was to find any kind of creepy leprechaun figurine? Is there not a massive market for this? I could find a few things here and there, but the proportions were way off. So I was so excited when I found this little guy on Amazon, and I was like, okay, let's break out the clay and see if we can make him creepy. The first thing I had to do was give him a proper hat. So I added the band and the buckle, and then it was time to start messing around with the beard and some bushy eyebrows. I wanted him to have a creepy smile, and this is where I struggled a bit. It was hard to really get the shape of the mouth, but I think in the end, it ended up being creepy. Maybe not exactly what I was going for, but it's vaguely horrifying. Well, we made something. That'll haunt your dreams. He's holding a little fishing pole with the fish at the end, but obviously the fish had to go because if he is fishing for anything, it's gold. This paper that I'm using is sticky on one side, which is great because I can just peel that backing off and then just stick my pieces of gold onto the fishing line. Now that we have our creepy leprechaun, let's go back and finish up our float. The last thing that I wanted to do was add a Happy St. Paddy's Day sign underneath the rainbow. I used some fishing line to attach my sign to my pipe cleaners, but I want to draw your attention to that cotton ball at the other end of the rainbow that is supposed to be the cloud. Now, I was out of cotton and I was gonna go to the store to get some. And then I noticed that my dog Angel had provided me an alternative. Yes, that's right. She loves destroying her toys. She can do it in about 5 seconds flat. And I thought this was perfect to use this cotton stuffing as my cloud. Angel always wants to help anyway, and we're reducing the amount of waste we are going to throw in the trash. So perfect. Now, you guys, I have to tell you about a tragedy. Look at this poor little leprechaun's butt. Yeah, he fell off this float when I was testing it out before, and so I ended up hot gluing him in place. I was so afraid the whole thing was going to shatter before I ever got to show you this. Time to get back to building our display. Remember that river I talked about? Well, here it is. I'm going to create the river using a product called Realistic Water and Plaster, and it's going to go in that area that I drew out. I have a whole separate video on how I created this river if you're interested. One thing I do want to mention here that I didn't mention in that video. You can see that I am stacking my styrofoam to create the river, putting one layer on top of the other to kind of get that recessed area. You can create bodies of water using a hot wire tool to carve out your styrofoam. I just didn't feel like messing with that, and this was just a faster way for me to do that. All right, and here is another project tragedy. If you want to see how this happened, check out my realistic water tutorial, but what I will say here is just be mindful of where you are leaving your project as you're waiting for your project to cure, and be mindful of other things that might be around your project. I didn't really love the look of this river, wasn't exactly what I was going for, but it does kind of end up fitting with the spooky theme. Remember at the beginning of the video when I was like, look at me, I'm measuring, this is going to go great. Did you guys see the foreshadowing? Yeah, so my display needed to be bigger. The base needed to be bigger, so that meant I got to make a whole bunch more cobblestone. My favorite thing in the whole world. Now, remember I stacked the river with 2 layers of styrofoam, so this other layer of cobblestone, I needed to build that up, and I'm just gonna stick some of that XPS foam underneath that cobblestone to give that evenness to the display that I need, and I'm not gonna do anything with that XPS foam because I'm going to put a border around it and I'm going to cover that up. So just a reminder, little things you can do to build up your display. Some things are just going to be like hidden, so you don't have to, I didn't have to make that cobblestone. Are we not all relieved? You know what I did need to make more of? Brick. I am creating some columns to add to the ends of the arches, and the arches is the foundation for that second layer, and the second layer is where I'm going to put my building, and I need to make that platform bigger. Not entirely because I mismeasured it. I originally had a different building that I was going to use for this display, but then this happened. I broke it. It was the first tragedy of the project, but it actually ended up being a really good thing because the building that I ended up going to buy, I think works much better for a pub. I was going to have to do a lot of adjustments to that building to get it how I wanted, so I can glue that back together and use it for something else. But you can see that it is smaller than the building that I ended up with, so I had to make those columns, and I'm, just wanting to emphasize that in this instance, it wasn't my subpar measurement skills that made me have to create more brick. All right, I was getting so excited because it was time to start setting things up so I could move on to the next step, which was adding the bridge. And I was gonna add the bridge to one side to connect the top parts of the platform. And despite all those fantastic measurements and then my additional column work, things still weren't working out. And it was definitely a mind bender to try to figure out what in the world had happened. If you're thinking the solution was to make more cobblestone, you are absolutely correct. So for the next 4 hours, we're going to watch me do just that. Ah, kidding, hilarious joke. I do want to show you here how I'm attaching those columns that we made. I'm just putting some toothpicks in, sliding them into place. I don't even need hot glue for this. And then I'm going to attach that additional cobblestone that we made on top. And the reason that I'm doing that is I just needed a little bit more real estate up on that second level to get everything to fit. Let's add our bridge and those final touches.